Hey, Greysteel Nation. Sully here with the Barbell Prescription. And we got a question from George Ramirez, whose post on one of our videos caught my eye. George was commenting on our video about advanced programming, and he says, one question, what is the use of the non-heavy lifts? What does having back offsets or light versions of the lifts contribute exactly? This has always confused me. It seems like, theoretically, the same program with just the heavy lifts and skipping everything else would yield the same progress. Am I wrong? I know you could just say, try it and let us know, but I'm hoping for some sort of theoretical explanation. Thanks for your question, George. But I'm afraid it contains a bias or some assumptions. You're assuming that we're doing drop sets with non-heavy lifts. I assure you, the loads that we're prescribing and the paradigms we discuss in our book, The Barbell Prescription, do not include non-heavy lifts. If you don't believe me, you should see the faces of my athletes when they pick up their boards on light day. So they're all somewhat heavy. And I remind you that intensity, as we've always used the word, is a relative metric. That said, your question is a reasonable one. We could start, if we did not value our sanity, by going to the literature. So I've got some stuff lined up for you here. So here's a study in Journal of Sports Science 2018 from Ozaki et al., where they looked at the effect of drop sets with resistance training on increases in muscle cross-sectional area, strength, and endurance. They found similar increases in drop set, multi-high load, and single set high load protocols with less time per workout in drop set protocols. Something we're going to find all over the literature, this less time with drop set protocols. It's not a very good paper methodologically from my reading of the abstract. I did not dive deep into the methods of any of these because I knew what I would find, this being the exercise science literature, and I'm trying to keep my psychological stress levels down to a dull roar. And here we have a paper from the Journal of Applied Physiology, Nutrition, and Metabolism looking at rest pause and drop set training from Allison Ennis et al., including Schoenfeld, where they found similar strength and hypertrophy adaptations compared with traditional sets in resistance-trained males. That's another thing we're going to find all over this literature. You seem to get the same results in the exercise science literature anyway. Ennis continues this work in the Journal of Psychological Reports 2023, and I love it when the title tells you what they found. Drop set resistance training versus pyramidal and traditional sets elicit greater psychophysiological responses in men. There you go. And so now you're asking, what does that mean? It means that drop set training elicited high ratings of perceived exertion. And that and a significant portion of your take-home pay will buy you a dozen eggs, but there it is. Pull the paper and judge for yourself. Here's one from the European Journal of Applied Physiology. Crescent pyramid and drop set systems do not promote greater strength gains, muscle hypertrophy, or changes on muscle architecture compared with traditional resistance training in well-trained men. So there's another one, no difference. That was in 2017, a negative study. Again, I did not look at the methods, but I did look at all the abstracts and the method portion of the abstracts, and this is a within subjects design study where they randomized one of your legs to traditional and the other to drop sets, which is, in my opinion, just really stupid for reasons I've expressed elsewhere. Anyway, drop sets weren't superior, but they weren't inferior, which is where the literature seems to go on this point. Here's a Turkish study, another leg press study where they found no difference. Methods not great. Okay, so those are some original investigations. Let's go to some of the aggregate studies. We can begin with this piece, Effects of Drop Sets on Skeletal Muscle Hypertrophy, a systematic review and meta-analysis published in Sports Medicine in 2023. The results of this systematic review and meta-analysis indicate that drop sets present an efficient strategy for maximizing hypertrophy in those with limited time for training. There was no significant difference in hypertrophy measurements between the drop set and traditional training groups, but some of the drop set modalities took 1/2 to 1/3 of the time compared with traditional training. So there we see that again. Here we've got a meta-analysis from Coleman et al., muscular adaptations in drop set versus traditional training. This meta-analysis seems to indicate that both drop set and traditional are viable options for promoting muscular adaptations. Again, drop sets may provide a more time-efficient alternative for achieving results. And so on. There's the literature full of improperly designed and poorly powered studies, but it seems to indicate that you can use drop sets or traditional heavy sets and get the same results, but maybe get out of the gym sooner with the drop sets. So the other sort of underlying bias or underlying assumption that I heard in your question was this idea like, what's the point of doing lighter lifts at all? And I guess for me, and this wasn't really addressed in this literature, there's just the simple, indisputable fact that every day can't be a heavy day once you're past the novice progression. I mean, you have to introduce some light days. You have to manage stress and recovery. That's what training is all about, a stress recovery adaptation cycle or some variant on that model, where you give yourself time to physiologically accommodate and adapt to the training stresses that you're applying. So I'm sorry, Carson, every day can't be heavy deadlift day. It's just a fact of life. So based on everything I've just said, it may not surprise you to learn that my use of drop sets isn't really based on the literature, but it is based on evidence, and that evidence is my experience training older adults in the gym, where I find that drop sets are a very valuable tool for adding heavy-ish volume without violating my athlete's recovery capacities. Eventually, every athlete, especially every older athlete, gets to the point where she can do 100 pounds for a set of 5, but not for 3 sets of 5. Adding drop sets allows her to continue to both train and practice the movement, and it gives her not just physical but also psychological relief. And I found that reaching for a top set of 5 or 3 or a top single pulls up the load for the drop sets, and that the accumulated work product from the drop sets pushes up the amount that she can do for the top sets. So the effect is synergistic. The practice component is also a thing. Form always breaks down a little on the heavy sets, where the goal is to just get that sucker up and get home alive, right? On drop sets, where the load is still heavy and challenging, but more manageable, we can bring the emphasis back to form instead of grind. And that's just useful. And I just can't overemphasize the psychological support that comes from doing drop sets. It's absolutely huge, especially on heavy days where I use them the most. You warm up to that heavy set of 3 or 1 or 5, whatever it is, depending on your programming. You work up to that one really heavy set that you've been dreading for 3 days, right? And like you get it and you rack the bar. And then those 2 or 3 drop sets at 20% less weight or 15% less weight, they just seem light as a feather in comparison. They're not. They're still really heavy. They're not non-heavy, right? But they just seem more manageable, and you're sort of just like, you're kind of flooded with dopamine and norepinephrine because you got that heavy set, and then the 2 drop sets just feel easier, and you accumulate that volume, and that psychological relief basically translates into an improvement in performance. I mean, we see it all the time. Anyway, we appreciate your question. Perhaps you'll experiment and incorporate drop sets into your programming. Perhaps you won't. We're going to try to start doing more of these Q&A things again in the future. We haven't done them in a while. We have a Q&A mailbox for which we do not send reply emails. Just to be clear, if you send us questions about like our gym schedule or getting hooked up for a coach, or should you take, should you do this, or you're coming to visit, or something like that, you won't get an answer because we just don't check that particular mailbox that often. This mailbox that you're seeing on the screen right now, it's for Q&A questions only, and we don't feel bad about not answering them right away or even answering them at all. But it is where you can send your questions. Our POG page, Patrons of Greysteel page, which is our closed group on Facebook, is our preferred source for questions. So consider joining at patreon.com/Greysteel. This channel depends on Patreon for its existence, so please think about it. Until next time, stay strong and stay healthy. The Burners? What does it say?
Deliciously different.
Yeah. What did you say?
Deliciously different is their...
Deliciously different. Burners.
Excellent with
I get something out of my mouth. Hey, Greysteel Nation. Sully here with the barbell prescription. And we have noise from the next room, which is like so beautifully timed, it's not even funny.
Perfect timing.
Yeah, perfect timing. Period. Pause. Well, that was fun. Here we go. Maybe they're not quite done.
It could be like residual aftershocks.
They're probably setting up their own shot. Here's one from the European Journal of Applied Physiology. Crescent pyramid and drop set systems do not promote greater strength gains, muscle hypertrophy, or changes on muscle architecture compared with traditional resistance training in well-trained men. So there's another one where they didn't find much of a difference. Here's one for the strength and endurance. And they found similar increases in drop set, multi-high load, and single set high load protocols. I got lost. That can happen.